Hello everyone. I welcome you all for joining online to this Aries e-lecture series. And this is first lecture of this series. This lecture will continue for 1 hour. We are going to have an overview of optical astronomy. I am Brijesh Kumar, an astronomer from Aries Nainital. So this is outline. Uh, we will start with having historical perspective, giving short of discovery moments in astronomy in general, and then why do we do optical astronomy in Himalayas? We'll discuss about that, and then importance of optical astronomy. I will describe, and at the end we will have a tour of optical facilities within India and over globe. So let us go through some discovery moments in astronomy. Planets move. This was discovered by ancient astronomers. This was bare eye observation. It happened 2000 BC to 500 BC, in that period. Even today, this kind of what a picture you see, Venus transiting the face of the sun, you can see with the bare eye observations. Now, second moment was it was said that by Nicholas Copernicus in 1543 AD that it is not the sun but the earth moves. That was a short of magic moment. So Copernicus gave a sun-centric model of Earth-Sun orbits. Now, in 1609 AD, Johannes Kepler gave Kepler's laws of motion. This was based on astronomical observations by Tycho Brahe, and Kepler actually spelled out the laws of motion, which said that orbits of planets are elliptical. Now, this was another discovery moment. It happened about 400 years back in 1609 AD. It was Galileo Galilei who used a very small optical telescope, that is 2-inch refractor telescope, and tried to see Jupiter and its moon. So 4 moons are seen. So this was for the first time that our view of celestial sources was switching over from bare eye to telescope, from a telescope. Now, in year 1758 AD, it was Edmund Halley who predicted the orbit of a comet, now known as Halley's Comet. And this comet has astronomical record of it's a visual record of comet since 240 BC. Now this is the year now 1781 AD. William Herschel is a British astronomer. In fact, it's said that is one of the great astronomer of all. He built a 48-inch reflector telescope from his private resources, and he tried to see the Milky Way in the night sky, and he discovered that these Milky Way bands are nothing but their disk of stars. Now coming to 1919 AD, it was Sir Arthur Eddington who knew about the prediction of Einstein's theory of relativity, that light bends. So during one of the solar eclipse, he could, using a photographic camera, he recorded image of stars, background stars, and by measuring the position of those stars by comparing with the earlier position, he could say that star light bends as per the prediction by Einstein's theory of relativity. This was an observational proof for Einstein's theory. This was a great remarkable moment for astronomy in general. Now the expanding universe in 1929 AD, it was Edwin Hubble, and he used a refractor telescope to measure recession velocity of far away objects, mainly nebulae, galaxies. And what you see here is basically he measured this recession velocity by measuring the spectra, and distances of those objects were measured independently, and he found that there is a relation: farther the object, larger the velocity. So hence, expanding universe, this was another discovery moment. Now came the radio astronomy in 1932 by Karl Jansky. So what you see here is the antenna in left picture used by Jansky, original, and this is one of the dish of GMRT, meter wave telescope in India, Pune. So radio waves emanating from the Milky Way in the night sky were received by these telescopes. Cosmic microwave background radiation. It was the year 1964, and these two astronomers, Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson, they recorded the relic of Big Bang. I mean, the afterglow of initial fireball. Then this represents a characteristic temperature of 3.5 degree Kelvin. So this was another discovery moment for the field of astronomy and astrophysics. Now in 1973, it was gamma ray burst. In fact, the small short pulses of gamma rays were detected by Vela satellite in 1973. Now we know that these are extremely energetic cosmic explosions, and in fact massive stars, including to form neutron stars or black holes. Now exoplanets, very recently, you must have seen in the news, 1995, Didier Queloz and Michael Mayer, they discovered for the first time a planet orbiting a sun-like star, 51 Pegasi. This was great news for the field of astronomy and astrophysics. We are still pursuing it. Accelerating universe, it was the year 1998 when these three astronomers, Adam Rees, Saul Perlmutter, and Brand Schmidt, they through a decade-long observation of distant supernovae and their redshift, they found that universe is not only expanding, but it is accelerating. In fact, they observed dimming in the light of farthest supernovae, and from that they concluded that the universe is accelerating. Yeah, so this is so far it was all electromagnetic radiation, from optical waveband to radio to gamma rays and all that. Now recently in 2017, the three astrophysicists, Rainer Weiss, Kip Thorne, and Barry Barish, they jointly actually announced that the detection of first time gravitational waves, and these are plots from their paper, and now we know that this happened from merger of two neutron stars. So this is the big picture we are having. What you see here, so Big Bang took place about 13.7 billion years or giga year before, into 10 to the power 9 years before, and then first stars were formed about 400 million years later, and then development of galaxies and planets and stars happened. Now we are present day, we are here now. Now our ultimate aim is to basically to understand how this universe started, and the first years, early years, how early stars formed, and how universe evolved. So this is also the part of big picture, the cosmology and related things. And now we know that the universe, in the universe, 73% is basically our dark energy from the present cosmological models, and 23% it's in the form of dark matter, which we do not know. It's still a topic of research, and only 4% is in the form of visible stars and interstellar gas, what we see in this particular big picture. Now, coming to the second item of this lecture, optical, why we do optical astronomy and why in Himalayas. Is basically we will see in the next picture, what you see in this slide, that the picture of map of India during night, and what you see, lights everywhere. In fact, this is a bright encircled with a white circle. This is a Delhi city, so you can see there's a more light there. And this is a strip which is shown here. These are central Himalayas strip, and in the right panel, what you see is a map of India, daytime map of India, and again this white circle denotes the location of Delhi, and red dot denotes the location of Nainital. So we are almost in this strip where there is no light pollution during night time, so that the view of celestial sources, stars and galaxies, is very clear from Nainital. Now at Aries, we have two campuses. So this is first campus is at Manora Peak, and what you see in circle, and it is 10 kilometers south of the Nainital city. There is another campus which is Devasthal. It is 50 kilometers east of Nainital city. What you see, it's a dome of telescope. So Aryabhatta Research Institute of Observational Sciences, as you all know, this is an autonomous institute under Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, and this came as observatory. This is running as observatory since 1954. Now it got reincarnated at Aries from 2004 when central government took over it from the state government. So the basic objective of this institute is to promote, guide and carry out frontline basic research in the area of astronomy, astrophysics and atmospheric sciences. So we basically built and operate state-of-the-art facilities to study Earth's atmosphere, planets, stars, galaxies and other celestial objects and phenomena. Aries has made several important contributions to the field, including the discovery of rings of Uranus, detection of first microlensing event, and observation of a GRB afterglow event from an Indian telescope. And we aspire to operate India's largest optical telescope at Devasthal, which is situated at 2.5 kilometer altitude, and we also aspire to operate highest altitude aerosol observatory and ST radar facility at Manora Peak. So this is Manora Peak, Nainital, picture of that closer view. So this is situated, as I said, 1950 meter above sea level. So what you see here is a 50 centimeter Schmidt telescope. This is used for survey of wide field survey of fast moving objects, rather mostly asteroids. And this is 104 centimeter telescope. This is in operation since 1972. And this is 15 centimeter solar telescope, which is operational since 1993. This is sitting here, and these buildings. These are basically main office of Aries. So 104 centimeter telescope. What you see in the left picture is basically inside the dome. So this is the telescope, and right side what you see, the outside view of this telescope. This is the dome. Slit is open over here. So this telescope is in operation since 1972, and we mainly study star formation using this optical telescope facility. Now this is 15 centimeter telescope. In left side you see the picture of telescope, and so aperture, this aperture of this is 15 centimeter, and right side you see this this telescope is installed on a pier, I would say concrete pier. So we study solar flares using this telescope. So what you see here is a 50 centimeter Schmidt telescope. This is indigenously designed and developed. So what you see is the telescope mounted inside the dome, and right side you see the picture of this dome. So we use this. This is we did preliminary observations with this, particularly engineering testing in 2009. So this is established with an aim to survey asteroids. Now at Devastal Peak, this is situated about 500 meter above the Manora Peak level, and what you see, this circle, this is a picture of 3.6 meter Devastal optical telescope. So first light for this telescope happened in year 2016. Now this is second circle. This circle is basically houses 1.3 meter Devastal optical telescope. This is in operation since 2010. Now this is 4 meter liquid mirror telescope will be installed at this particular location. So first light for this telescope is expected in year 2020. So this is Devastal Peak houses professional optical telescope. So this is a closer picture of 1.3 meter Devastal optical telescope. What you see here is the closer view of this telescope, and the right side is the roll of roof of this telescope. So this telescope is used to study optical transients and variables, for example supernovae, gamma ray burst afterglows, and active galactic nuclei. Now this is a picture of 3.6 meter telescope. What you see is the picture of this telescope. This is about 12 meter height from telescope floor, and this is a picture of dome. This is about 10-story building, about 30 meter high from the ground floor. So this is a huge building. So this particular telescope is used for faint galactic and extra galactic sources study. So now 4 meter liquid mirror telescope, what you see is a bowl filled with a mercury in this, and it's a rotating bowl that forms mirror of the telescope, and right side what you see is basically the structure where on the top this camera will be mounted. So this we are going to install this telescope, and hopefully very soon it will be commissioned. And two important goals for this telescope is basically to observe distant quasars and distant supernovae. Again, this is the field of cosmology, and we want to understand the accelerating universe and related phenomena. Now coming to the third item of this lecture, and in this we will discuss the importance of optical astronomy, particularly, of course, in comparison to other near infrared, ultraviolet, gamma ray, X-ray, and other wave bands. So if we talk in general about astronomy and astrophysics, so basically this is we study the physical and chemical processes, and we characterize in terms of that we characterize galaxies, stars, planetary system, and interstellar matter. Whatever we observe, we try to understand these celestial objects and phenomena in astrophysical terms. This is what is astrophysics, basically astronomy plus applying the laws of physics to understand this celestial phenomena. That's what we do in astrophysics. So astronomy is a giant natural laboratory. In fact, the kind of temperature you get, it is up to 10 to the power 8 degree Kelvin, starting from, of course, few degree Kelvin, even as low as 0 degree Kelvin. And the density range you get 10 to the power minus 24, that is interstellar intergalactic medium, is space to 10 to the power 12 gram per centimeter cube. This is center of neutron stars. And the mass range for sun, you can go to 1/10 of a solar mass to 100 solar mass stars in case of stars. In some galaxies, there is a huge range, 10 power 12 to 10 power 13 solar masses. So remember, this one solar mass is 2 into 10 power 33 gram. Now, the field of astrophysics has made several contributions to the physics, and that includes the laws of gravity, the general theory of relativity, particularly the observational proof, and the concept of nuclear fusion. I mean, this is how hydrogen is getting burnt at the center of stars and how energy is getting generated. This is all field relates to that. Then, of course, the cosmology and high energy particle physics, that is another area where astrophysics has contributed a lot. So, Nobel Prize in Physics, I mean, 7 during last 40 years they have come from astrophysics. So, but when you compare this astrophysics in terms of rather astronomy, in terms of experimental physics or laboratory physics, then in case of laboratory analysis, the only analysis which are possible is basically the meteorite sample, which we can sometimes they fall on Earth, and lunar material we bring them from moon, and interplanetary space probes we bring some material from solar system objects, so we can study them in the lab. So this is the only scope for laboratory analysis. Apart from that, the sources, the faraway sources, particularly sun, planets, stars, galaxies, they cannot be tempered. So it's basically an observational science and not an experimental science. So what happens when, how do we study all these astrophysical sources? So what is shown over here is basically a star. From a star, the light travels to Earth. So in between there is interstellar space, and then the Earth atmosphere is a blanket of air around Earth. It's spherical. So what happens? The attenuation of starlight happens. So that we know, and then degradation of pointing sources also happens due to Earth atmosphere, and sometimes we call it twinkling of stars, or blurring of sources, sky sources. Well, what kinds of astrophysical sources that typically there in sky? Normally there are two kinds of sources we come across. One is the thermal sources. They emit radiation as black body. So what you see is the x-axis is the frequency in hertz, and y-axis is the flux in Jansky. So this is a typical black body spectrum. So for two temperatures this is plotted, and this depends on of course this lambda, and of course this temperature dependence, black body radiation. There is another kind of radiation we get from sources which is called non-thermal sources, particularly gamma ray burst kind of sources. They emit using non-thermal processes. So now coming to the this atmospheric opacity and the window which is available to us. So what you see here is the entire window from gamma rays to long wavelength, these radio waves, meter, centimeter, meter, and kilometer waves, and gamma rays. So gamma rays, X-rays, and ultraviolet, they are basically locked by upper atmosphere. And visible light, it directly reaches Earth, and part of infrared also gets absorbed by Earth atmosphere, but it reaches to us partly. Then radio wave band, meter wave band, it reaches to Earth. So so this is optical wave band is very good to study celestial sources directly from Earth. So, but if you see the kind of telescopes, particularly the tools which are required to receive signals at different electromagnetic radiations, they are different. Particularly if you see this gamma ray, this is International Gamma Ray Astrophysics Laboratory integral. This is done from the space. So we launch satellites to study signals from astrophysical sources at gamma ray waveband. Similarly, this is a Chandra spacecraft shown. This is X-ray, and ultraviolet. We again go to the space based, and then this is a ground-based telescopes, Paranal Observatory. Some pictures are shown. Then this is infrared. Again, we go to space, and this is ALMA microwave wave bands, and this is radio. 100-meter green band. So what we see from here is, to study a particular wave band, we need a very special techniques. So now this is how, I mean, we require all astrophysical sources to be observed at multi-wavelength to have a complete picture, complete understanding of those sources, those phenomena in astrophysical terms. So what you see at the top is basically, it's a red band, it's a Milky Way galaxy, it's a cold, it represents a cold interstellar medium. And here in B you see at I band, infrared, and this warm interstellar medium, star forming regions, this represents. Then in picture C, this is a visual band image. This is only Milky Way galaxy, you can see this is only stars. And at D, at X-ray wave band, you see this X-ray stars emitting only X-rays. So this represents a very hot interstellar medium. Now at this gamma ray, I mean cosmic ray induced gammas, neutron star light can be seen in this E. So to summarize, we need to study, have a multi-wavelength observation to understand any astrophysical source. Now, why optical astronomy? Why not gamma ray astronomy only or radio astronomy only? Because this optical astronomy is as old as human civilization. I mean, our eye acts as optical telescope, and retina acts as a detector, and our brain acts as an analyzer. We try to immediately see stars and visualize, at least see that what colors they are, whether they're twinkling. So immediately certain things we can immediately see, particularly the sun, moon, and other objects. So, and second thing is, this is very valuable for astrophysical studies, of course. So, and also the recent developments in computers, electronics, and other areas have contributed significantly to this growth of optical telescope, which we cover in this lecture partly, and also in my next lecture, detectors and image analysis, that will have improved significantly in optical astronomy. Now, to one key example I would like to give here regarding importance of optical observations. They are still the best while it comes to estimating certain parameters. For example, the distance, age, and abundance determination of astronomical events. For example, this gamma ray burst phenomena, they were discovered in late 60s, but distances were very recently estimated using GRB afterglow observations in optical. So optical observations are very important in that reference. Of course, this new windows of multi-wavelength, particularly X-ray, gamma ray, infrared, they are very recent. I mean, they have been used to discover very new and exotic objects like quasars, pulsars, neutron stars, and in some cases black holes. But the true nature of these objects, actually we need optical observations, because the wealth of knowledge which we have in optical waveband, particularly atomic and molecular transitions, they are best known at optical wavebands and near infrared and infrared. So that is why this field of optical and near infrared are extremely important when it comes to astronomy. Well, I will just highlight here. Uh, this is a table. I mean, the luminosity of sun. If you recall, this is 4 into 10 to the power 33 per second. I mean, you must have studied the solar constant. I mean, this total luminosity emitted by sun. This luminosity is at the surface of emitted by sun. So this is intrinsic because the sun is pretty close. So what we see in this table is basically the first table. There are objects that are listed, and the second column we see the luminosity solar units. So if you take case of sun, so if we call this luminosity as 1, then we also take apparent luminosity as 1 because this is a pretty close by object, and we all know that light takes 500 seconds to travel from sun to earth. Now let us take the case of Sirius. This is another star, and this is very bright star. So its apparent luminosity is 10 power minus 10 in comparison to sun, but it is intrinsically 22 times brighter than sun. So you can imagine, and light takes 8.8 years. So in fact, this also gives you an estimate of distance, that is, it is 8.8 light years away. So this scale we calibrate by keeping the source at a certain distance, 10 parsec away, so that we calibrate this apparent luminosities with the intrinsic one. And intrinsic luminosity of these celestial objects is very important to compare various models such laws of physics. So similarly, if you take globular cluster, this is situated at 75 kilolight year away, bright Cepheid 190 kilolight year away. This is all local universe model. I mean, the distances are calculated. Some supernova, if you take, their intrinsic luminosity is about 10 to the power 8 times of that of sun. So this is situated very far away, 110 mega light year. Similarly, quasars and gamma ray bursts, these are very distant objects. I mean, their intrinsic luminosity, but still we are able to see them. So 10 to the power 10, 10 to the power 17 times the luminosity of the sun. So this is how the distance parameter is very well characterized using optical observations, and we bring them on intrinsic scale and to study these objects further. Well, now mostly I have covered the overview for optical astronomy, and now I will take you to the pictures of optical telescope at Indian sites and over globe. And with these slides, I will try to emphasize that how the field of optical astronomy have evolved from time immemorial. So first, let us see how optical astronomy facilities are there in India. So what you see here is a picture of India map, and so topmost in the Ladakh, state, Jammu and Kashmir earlier. Now this Henley site. There we have a telescope. Now at Nainital, this is the location for Aries Institute. So here we have optical telescopes. Now Guru Shikhar, some infrared telescope are there, operated by PRL Ahmedabad. Now at Giravali, Pune, this is here also we have optical facility. These are operated by IUCA. Then Hyderabad, we have facility. This is operated by Osmania University, and we have facility at Kavelur. So these are the places where we have optical facilities. So when we discuss about Banora Peak Nainital, so we started with a 25 centimeter refractor telescope in 1955, and what you see, this is a picture of this telescope. And this is we don't need electronics devices to operate this, but this is a gravity based gravity operated telescope. Now this is another telescope, 38 centimeter refractor telescope. This we have what you see, and this was installed in 1958. This is another 52 centimeter refractor telescope which we have at Manora Peak, Nainital. It came in year 1962. Now this is another 56 centimeter reflector telescope at Nainital, 1965. Now in 1972, we established 1 meter class optical telescope. This is called 104 centimeter Sampunanand telescope, and this we use this to study stars, star formation. In fact, we collect data using this telescope for various PhD thesis, and research students, they use this facility at ARIES. So this is another 104 centimeter Zeiss telescope at Kavalur. It was installed in 1972. What you see here is basically the telescope, and right side it is this dome. And this is a 2.34 meter Vainu-Bapu telescope at Kavalur. This telescope was established in 1979, and this is the telescope you see. And left side, right side, you see the dome. This telescope was entirely manufactured and built in-house within our country. So this is 1.2 meter. Unfortunately, I don't have picture for this telescope, so I put a representative. So 1.2 meter optical telescope was installed at Japal Rangapur, Hyderabad in 1980. Now at Mount Abu, Ahmedabad, we are operating 1.2 meter telescope. This is optical and near infrared telescope. We are operating it since 1983. Now 2 meter optical telescope we are operating at Henley, and this is called Himalayan Chandra telescope, SCT. What you see here, this is ultra azimuth optical telescope, the picture of telescope, and here it is dome you see over here. And this site is situated at 4.5 kilometer above mean sea level. In fact, this is highest altitude optical observatory in the world. This is another telescope in India we operate. This is 2 meter IUCAA telescope, and left side you see the picture, and right side you see the dome with the open slit. This is at Giravali, Pune. We are operating it since 2006. So this is a 1.3 meter telescope at Devasthal, and this is a wide field telescope. This we are operating since 2010. So this is 3.6 meter optical telescope. This was installed in 2016 at Devasthal, and left side what you see is the picture of telescope, and right side is the dome. So now these have been the facilities within our country, India. We can have a tour of many other optical facilities over the globe. Let us go through that. So this is a 1 meter Yax refractor telescope which was operating since 1897. This is the largest refractor telescope we have, and this is 2.5 meter Hooker telescope. 1917 it was established. Then 5 meter aperture Palomar telescope. This was established in 1949, and you can see that this is a very heavy telescope. 20 ton is the weight of mirror, and the moving parts is 530 tons. So this is a very huge structure. You see the earlier 1949, and see the diameter, it is 42 meter diameter is the size of dome, and it weighs 1000 tons dome. And so these earlier telescopes were huge, I mean including dome structure and the telescope itself. So this is 1.2 meter Palomar Smith telescope. This was established in 1950. So this you can see, yeah. So in fact, this was used for Palomar All Sky Survey. This, and in fact, this some 10th planet. It was in the news. It was discovered with this telescope. So this is another telescope over globe. This is 3-meter Lick telescope, 1959. It was established in, and right side you see the dome. Again, there's a huge structure of dome you see. This is 4-meter aperture telescope, Skid Peak National Observatory telescope, and Cerutolo telescope. These were established in 1970. Now, 3.6 meter ESO telescope. This was established in 1977. So, left side you see the picture of this telescope. Right side is basically the dome. So, this is another 3.6 meter telescope, 1979. This is Canada-France-Hawaii telescope. This is another telescope. This was established in 1989, and this has a 4-meter primary aperture. This telescope uses a new technology to control the mirrors. This is called active optics technology. We'll study more about this technology in next lecture. And so this actively controls and aligns mirrors of telescope, and hence enables formation of sharp images from telescope. So this technology is in place since 1989, and we are trying to experiment to improve this technology further. This is in optical waveband. We have also the astronomical community have also built telescope and put in space, because the resolution obtained from an optical telescope in space is about 10 times better than the resolution we achieve from telescope from ground. So we will discuss more about this. So this is a 2.4 meter Hubble Space Telescope. In fact, most of the images of at optical wavebands you see, they are taken from this Hubble Space Telescope. So this is a ground-based telescope. This was established in 1995. This is a 10-meter Keck telescope. In fact, two 10-meter Keck telescopes are established. Using interferometric technique, we try to get better resolution of stars. That is why there are two Keck telescopes. This is 8-meter VLT telescope. This was established in 2004. So you see, this is how huge. In fact, a picture of a person is shown over here. This is very small in comparison to that. There is a mirror, primary mirror over here, secondary, and then there's a mechanical mount for this telescope. And right side you see the dome for this optical telescope. Now there are 4 8-meter class telescope. They have been established at in Chile, and so if you combine the light received for a certain source, celestial source, using all these 4 telescope, they become equivalent to a 16-meter class optical telescope. So larger the aperture, more the photons, optical photons we collect. So in more detail we can study the celestial sources. This is how the aperture is very important for this telescope. So now the astronomical community, world community, we are planning 30-meter aperture optical telescope. So there are 3 such telescopes which are planned, and this is one of them, 30-meter optical telescope. What you see in left side, this is basically design of this telescope, and with the yellow there are various instruments. Beam from a mirror is getting diverted, So this is design view. This is again design picture for this telescope. So India is also participating in this construction and development phase of this telescope, and we'll be able to use data from this telescope for studying celestial sources. So this is another telescope, giant Magellan telescope. This is again will operate at optical waveband. This will also become operational somewhere in 2030. And this is extremely large telescope. I mean, you can see this is being developed. This is another telescope being developed by Europeans. And what you see is the artistic view of this facility. You can see that picture of a person and car is there. In comparison to that, the how big the structure is there, and how difficult it would be to control the mirrors for this telescope and operate this telescope to study celestial sources. Yeah, so normally this telescope are installed at very high altitude sites to basically to get better and transparent skies and better view of celestial sources. So this is one of those sites. I mean, LASIA, which you see there are many telescope. Countries across the globe, they have come and they have tried to install and develop a telescope with a very specific purpose. So there are many telescopes. Now this is another site, Mauna Kea, which is situated at about 4 kilometer above mean sea level, and this is known for a very transparent and better astronomical skies. So there are many countries who have set up their own telescope at this particular site. Okay, thank you for your attention. Now we are over with this lecture, and now I will go through the comments which have been received online, and select few of the comments for reply. Yeah, so I have received this comment from Mr. Gaurav Singh Raghuvanshi, and he is asking that what is the fundamental difference between active and adaptive optics. Of course, this is a subject of another lecture. I mean, even each topic. But I would briefly say that this active optics works in a low frequency domain, and 1 hertz level. So every second, we try to get feedback on the alignment of optics, and we try to correct them online. So that is called active optics. So this basically corrects deformation due to mirrors of telescope. Now the image degradation not only happens due to misalignment of mirror of telescope, but image degradation also happens due to Earth atmosphere, particularly change in the refractive index. So your this images of stars get blurred, so we call seeing. So if you want to correct that blurring, and you want to get form a very sharp images, then we use adaptive optics technique. And adaptive optics basically is these are in the converging beam. We try to deploy a mirror which can operate at higher frequencies, 30 hertz frequencies. So and very fast images it takes, and tries to correct correction due to Earth atmosphere. So that is the first question. Now I will take up the second question. It is by Mr. Sarwan Kumar, and he is asking why there are many optical telescope with diameter 3.6 meter. Any specific reason? I think there is very obvious questions that why this there are many 3.6 meter aperture. In fact, the telescopes in 1970s which were developed, most of them they were having 3.6 meter. Actually, the primary mirror blank are fabricated, rather casted, by a very few companies in the world. And casting of any mirror blank uh, is a highly technical job, and rather I would say very challenging to get the quality of optical glass with which mirrors are fabricated. So they are mostly made of a certain size. So most of the time this 3.6, 3.8 or 4. So astronomers mainly decide the 4-meter class optical telescope, and they look for the availability of this blanks, whether close to that, what are the availability of the blank. And it so happens that, look, like in case of 3.6 meter optical telescope also, it similar thing happened. We wanted we started with a 4-meter class optical telescope. Then we found that, look, 3.6 meter diameter blank is already available. So, and the casting of a new blank will take more time. So to save time and other aspects, engineering aspects, we go for this diameter. So on a certain aspects, diameter variation is decided by those factors, engineering factors, which are not in the hands of astronomy. This. So this is there is another third question. This is by Rashmi Sharan. The question is there any telescope being constructed in India just like the 16-meter collective telescope we saw earlier? Can they be better compared to single mirror telescope considering the costs? Uh, uh, I would say your question is very important in the sense that when the cost of and time for fabricating this developing this optical telescope of particularly larger size, let's say 4-meter, I would say, and larger, is very high, and it takes 5 to 6 years to establish a 4-meter class optical telescope. And even 30-meter class optical telescope, they are taking at least a decade, even more than a decade, to establish. So why not combine smaller telescope and use them to act like a larger size 16 meter, as the example is given, equivalent telescope. In India, yes, such things can be done, but we have not thought very much in that direction, because that has to be done at a development phase when you are trying to develop a certain telescope. So, for example, within India, we have been developing 2-meter class and 4-meter class optical telescope, I would say. And so for that, if there is any new project, probably, and with that aim, then probably it is possible to do that. But right now there is no project which envisages that kind of thing. Now there is another question by Divita Sharogi, uh, and it is asked that how does liquid telescope works. Actually, these are I would say these are not liquid telescope, but these are liquid mirror telescopes. So mirror of these telescopes are not glass, just as we are used to, but this is made up of shot of liquid. I would say in this case mercury is used, and it is kept in a bowl, and bowl is this bowl rotates, and bowl shape of bowl is in such a way that it forms a particular shape, parabola, let's say, and then light falls on this parabola and it focuses at the camera. So that is the basic principle of these liquid mirror telescopes. So that is again, I mean, requires a separate lecture to describe about how liquid mirror telescope works. Hopefully in this series, e-lecture series, you will be able to hear more about all this, I mean, the areas from where these questions are coming. Okay, so I thank all the audience which is online for joining this e-lecture series, and my next e-lecture will be on. It is short of extension of this first lecture. That will be on optical telescope. So I would say stay tuned. Thank you. Thank you all. Feedback form, sir.
We post a feedback form that they can fill in. Means you can announce it.
Yeah, maybe someone else can announce.
So, hi everyone, to all our good audience. So we are also arranging a feedback form that will be posted in this page. So you can give your opinion about this particular lecture, so that in future we can improve our this series. So we'll be hoping to look forward for as many responses as we can. So that's all for today. So we will be posting the schedule for the next lecture very soon. Thank you all.
Thank you.